morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. It's Friday. How you doing? Morning, China. How you doing?
Morning, Cheryl. I'm doing good, thank you.
Good, good, good. With that beautiful New York scene behind you, the yellow
Indeed.
taxi.
Indeed.
um, so welcome everybody that's joined, or if you're watching it on the replay. I know we've got a bank holiday coming up this weekend if you're here in the UK. So people are probably already starting to wind down. So this conversation might help you wind down. Hopefully it won't wind you up. But Barbie, we had to get into it. So I am joined, really pleased this morning to be joined by China Rooms, who is a history graduate from King's College London, or as her bio says, history over receipts. Please. She's an associate at the Unmistakable. Just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do there, China, and what the Unmistakable is about.
So the Unmistakable is an EDR consultancy that focuses on embedding inclusion into different companies, organizations, and brands. I'm an associate, so I help on the delivery teams. I help do research. I help consult on the teams, and yeah, it's just basically to make sure that we embed inclusion in everything we do. Yeah, but aside from that, I love history, as you said. I like to call myself the historian with receipts. Yeah, I just love seeing how the past and the future are very interconnected. And we see that with stuff even like Barbie, hence why I wrote the article. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And Mercy, hi Mercy. Good morning. Mercy says she's really looking forward to this. So I can't believe that there aren't more people that wanted to talk about Barbie. Tell me a bit about that's how I found you through your article, because I was like, I really want to talk about this. Who else is talking about this? About the article. First of all, why it was called what it was called and why you wrote it. Let's start there.
Well, first of all, I love the track. I'm a part-time barb, so I love Nicki Minaj. But
Right.
the main reason why I wrote the article is because there was such a conversation about it, and I just saw a lot of women who looked like me
Yeah.
wearing pink, going to the cinema, talking about Barbie, even coming out of the cinema like tears of crying. Like it was a lot of people seemed very emotionally invested in the film.
Yeah.
It seemed even black women like me were saying, "Oh wow, it's such a good film, such a good messaging," and I just saw loads of people from different walks of life saying that. So I was like, okay, why are people saying this about Barbie?
Yeah.
Because I had Barbies myself, so I know what Barbie's about, but because of what Barbie I know it to stand for, it
Yeah.
was a bit conflicting in the messaging. So I thought, okay, let me see this for myself. I went
Yeah.
with my mum, and when I saw the film, I definitely was pleasantly surprised by what I saw and how they dealt with their history, how they dealt with topics of diversity, and I just felt I wrote the article the same night because I was just like, wow, this is so not
Brilliant.
what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting it to touch on such topic areas, and I just felt like, yeah, I thought I had something to say about it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And do you know what? And we'll get into this, but yeah, I spoke to somebody who had been to see the film. She was like, "Oh," and it was she kind of, I guess, saw it quite surface level. But I was like, a bit like you. I was like, "There's layers to this. Like, there's
Yeah.
some serious layers and really good talking points." And given that it's been such a box office hit,
Mm,
right? It's beating Harry Potter apparently currently in the box office.
mhm.
Definitely worth the conversation. So a few stats. The first Barbie came out in 1959. So Barbie, she's getting on in years, right? So,
Yes.
and Barbie has had over 200 jobs, according to Mattel. And some of her career highlights include being an Olympic athlete. I don't know how many of these you would know, seeing as you had Barbies.
Mhm.
A wildlife conservationist, an Air Force pilot, a news anchor, an astrophysicist. We all know that she's a doctor, a scientist. And so far, apparently, Barbie has run for president 6 times, apparently. I wonder if she probably actually do a better job.
Maybe.
Which did you have any Barbies that had jobs, just out of interest?
Do you know what? I feel like I had stereotypical Barbie. I feel like
Right.
but I also had Bratz dolls. But I also had the Barbie hair doll where I played with the hair,
Oh,
and
okay.
the hair, cut off the hair, a bit like weird Barbie, but we can get into that.
We can get into the Barbie. So just a, who is the movie? Who do you think the movie's for? It's interesting that you said that when you went, actually, it's a very diverse
Yeah.
audience and the people that you heard talk about. So who do you think it's for, and who will enjoy it?
Um, I feel like the movie could be for anyone. I
Mm,
think when we look at the who's going actually to watch it,
mm,
I feel like it's for the parents
yeah.
who are buying the dolls. I do think that there is messages that kids can get out of the film, but I
Mm,
think it's for everyone. I think it can be enjoyed by anyone. I think it
mm,
depends on how you view the messaging and how it lands with you.
yeah.
Um, that's why I was so surprised by it, because for someone like me, I quite enjoyed it.
Mm,
There is the satire element to it. There is, oh hi
mm,
Barbie. It's very kid friendly in that way, but I think adults can really gravitate towards the message because it does touch on a lot of topics.
yeah.
It does kind of, especially with America Ferrera's character, that kind of
Yeah.
shows the adult element to it, showing
Yeah.
that women can be kids too.
Yeah.
So I think it's very diverse in that sense. I think kids can go with their parents, but
Yeah.
also they may leave the film feeling a bit confused or not really knowing the message, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Because some of the themes and messages are quite deep, aren't they? Which
Yeah.
we'll get into. I mean, there is something about, and it's interesting that you mentioned that you had Bratz dolls as well. My daughter had Bratz dolls.
Yes.
Is there a place in modern society for Barbie and for Barbie dolls? What's your view on that?
Um, I feel like there's a place for the Barbie persona, and I think
Mhm.
not the Barbie doll, because I think stereotypical Barbie doesn't have a place in society where we are today. I
Right.
think stereotypical Barbie, I think we have to be in my article, I did say we can't say it's symbolic of white feminism, but I think
Yeah.
that's what it was birthed out of. It was birthed out of,
Yeah.
being that doll that represents the experience of a white woman. So
Yeah.
I do think that in terms of the Barbie persona, like when you've got in my article when I mentioned about Nicki Minaj, or the idea of Barbie can mean different things to different people. Barbie could
Mm.
mean being independent, tapping into your femininity. Barbie could mean wearing pink, feeling pretty. Like it could be a feeling rather
Yeah.
than um, putting a doll to a face, if that makes sense. I think
Mm.
stereotypical the original Barbie that was kind of cultivated to
Mhm.
subvert gender stereotypes and make women show that they can be independent, that kind of message could be for society of today. But in terms
Yeah.
of what Barbie looked like then, there's so many different Barbies, and I think another message of the film, in
Yeah.
that everyone can be Barbie. You can have
Yeah.
present Barbie, you can have Barbie with a disability, you can have plus size Barbie.
Yeah.
So the Barbie itself as a persona, I think you can put your own spin on Barbie.
Yeah. And let's just talk about that in terms of the representation, because as you say, stereotypical Barbie, which is the character that Margot Robbie plays
Yeah.
effectively, that's stereotypical. So as you say, it's interesting what you say about in terms of the link to feminism
Yeah.
and the link to the different waves of feminism. So I guess from a time perspective, yes, there's something about the jobs that Barbie's had, that kind of came around the 70s. So the
Mhm.
70s was when they started. So it had been around for a good, I guess, 10 years or so,
Yeah.
just as a doll that was like
Mhm.
nice to look at, you could dress up. And then the jobs started to come in the 70s, which, as you say, kind of links into
Mhm.
sort of that feminist movement around jobs and equal rights and all of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that first wave of feminism.
Yeah.
But I feel I'm looking at my historical lens, there's been feminism from probably the late 19th century in terms of, but that was for more middle class white
Yeah.
women. And then potentially we could see there was a feminist movement when you look at the First World War, and how women had to take on different roles, whether it be in construction or while the men were at war. So there has been different waves of feminism. So I do think Barbie came in on that third wave. Sorry, let me correct myself. That third wave of feminism, when you really see
Yeah.
the Equal Rights Act, when you see actually other women like Black women, especially in the UK, Black
Yeah.
feminism taking a rise. With the Heart of Race, that book, it's a good book. But yeah, I forgot the point. Sorry.
Yeah, about like the representation and how it changed, and how the Barbies evolved, almost like as feminism was evolving, which
Yeah.
you explained so brilliantly there in terms of the different waves. Yeah, if
Mhm.
anybody has never sort of like looked into the different waves of
Mhm.
feminism, and I guess what something you've touched on there, the discussions around how intersectional or inclusive feminism was or wasn't at
Mm.
certain times. There's a whole, we could almost do a whole LinkedIn live just on that. especially even going back to first wave feminism, and how, you know, that really sort of threw certain people and certain women under the bus, right? Just to kind of get ahead. Yeah, it's fascinating. And then, as you say, in terms of, so Barbie was really around like that third wave feminism in terms of like, you know, modern day career woman, all of that sort of thing, equal rights, you know, harassment act and all of that stuff. We've got a comment coming in here. Question for later. You're talking Q&As and great to hear. See you, China. I went to see the film twice.
Wow.
Once to see, and second to actually digest and review. I love that. Do you think the film's decision to include many diversity pillar representation was a diversity washing cover to reinforce stereotypical Barbie to the beauty industry? That's a good question. That's a good question. We will definitely be coming on to that. Thank you for your question. Yeah, and if anybody else has got any questions, please feel free to put them in. Just so if we start to move more into the representation, then the first Black character, who was called Christy, because obviously Barbie had these friends. So Christy was introduced in 1968, so 9 years after Barbie's launch. She had a friend, which, you know, often in the role of, you think about film and TV, the friend is often the Black person, right? So Christy was the friend. And then in 1980 was the first fully fledged Black Barbie doll, who was designed by Kitty Black Perkins, who was Mattel's first Black designer, which is interesting because, you know, we were talking just before we came on this. There's something about, you know, sometimes we'll talk about, you know, the benefits of having diversity in an organization. So they had their first Black designer, and lo and behold, they then had their first Black Barbie doll. Do you know what I mean? It kind of, when you've got diversity inside the organization, it helps you see the world differently. And then also, if we go on to 2016, Mattel introduced 3 new body type options for Barbie. So moving away from the very unrealistic, slender, elongated proportions, the new doll lineup featured curvy, petite, and tall. I think Barbie already was tall, but anyway. And then in 2020, we had a Barbie who uses a wheelchair, a Barbie with hearing aids, and a Barbie with a prosthetic leg arrived in 2022. And the first Barbie representing people with Down syndrome debuted in April. I think that was April this year, right? Wow. The Barbie with Down syndrome. So let's talk about the representation. Do we think it was diversity washing? What are your thoughts on that, China?
I do feel like advocacy is right, and I do feel like it's hard. There's a hard line between quote unquote woke and quote unquote tick boxing. I think it depends on where you sit on the spectrum, if you feel like representation is needed or if you're happy with how things are in society today. I feel that potentially, if we're looking at representation, the film did have a lot of that. But for some people may be as more moved than others, because while Issa Rae was in the film, and I love Issa Rae, she didn't have much to say. There wasn't, even though she was President Barbie, her kind of title relative to the actual time she spoke wasn't much. But obviously we knew the film was, you know, centered around stereotypical Barbie. But I do think representation, you need to have that, because I think it's important that people can see themselves in something. And I feel that Mattel, in terms of going for representation, they kind of had to future-proof the brand, because, you know, in the culture that we have going on right now, you kind of have to, there's a hard line between, you know, being too woke or not actually doing anything at all, but then you don't want to be performative. So this is a lot of conversations that we have with clients, but I think you have to do something. Otherwise your brand can't move with the times, and Mattel could obviously be liable to backlash. You're not going to please everyone, but it's important to have intention with doing stuff like this.
I guess, if they didn't move with the times, they would have been cancelled. You know, they'd have faced being cancelled for sure. I guess the thing about the diversity washing, it actually reminds me of one of my other vices, which is Sex and the City, and the reboot of Sex and the City, and just like that, which again had similar criticism almost, that there's like a diversity wash. You know, oh gosh, now they're trying to tick every box. And now we've got a black person, a non-binary person, a person in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? It is difficult, as you say, China, to say, is it helping? You know, because is it now doing diversity, or is it just ticking a box, or is it diversity washing? And it's always difficult to know what that motive is. I do think perhaps similar to and just like that, which is the reboot of Sex and the City, when you've got a small number, so a small cast, it can sometimes look as though it's artificial, right? And when I think of, say, another film that did that, the Beauty and the Beast remake, you know, when that was done, and you had a lot more, you know, sort of black and brown people in the cast as a whole. Sometimes when we then see it, it almost looks as though they've gone too far, because you're seeing almost like microcosm, and there's almost this over representation just because of the proportions, right? But I don't know. I think it's almost a bit of they're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah, I do think that in terms of representing different identities, I think that, you know, you have to, if you have an issue with diversity being represented on the screens you're seeing, maybe you need to look at the perspective of why you're saying that, because you could have a privilege that maybe you're unconsciously, you know, projecting. Like, I feel some, of course, like for instance, Sex and the City, because I love Sex and the City, even though it was way before me. Still love it, love Samantha. Some people may argue that, you know, you can't ruin a good thing, it was really good, but at the same time, if some things in the past, if they were applied today, I think it wouldn't resonate. And I think with today, especially with my generation, Gen Z, we need to see something. Otherwise, we're not going to invest, and we're not going to spend our money. We're not going to spend our time.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that as well, I think for me, actually, the thing, because when I think diversity washing, it reminds me of the term greenwashing. And I think there's something about, in the way that it's done, is it done authentically, and is it done so that it really does reflect true lived experience? And I think if you can answer both to that, I'm kind of here for it. Like, I'm okay with it. If it's a case of, you know, you've put characters in and they've still been written by, you know, writers who aren't diverse, and so actually when they open their mouth, which I remember here in the UK, EastEnders used to fall foul of this for a long time. They had a lot of, this is going way, way, way back. They had a lot of, you know, characters who were, you know, black and brown or LGBTQ, etc. But the writers weren't, and it would come through. The stories weren't authentic, right? That to me is diversity washing. But actually, if, you know, if films, TV, product, services, if it's done authentically, so that you get, you know, as we were saying, getting the diversity in the teams, so that actually when that, you know, diversity and inclusion is applied, it comes from a place of lived experience. I think that's the way that you get beyond it, basically.
But I do want to just quickly touch on that. Even though I feel like lived experience should come through, I feel like we shouldn't rely just alone on lived experience, because I think it also doesn't allow people to have the responsibility to learn about different people's experiences and apply that to their own viewpoint. But
no, absolutely, definitely. Okay, let's talk about some of the themes. See, we've been talking for ages. We haven't even really got into the film yet. So the film has been cancelled in a few countries for various things. So, you know, promoting homosexuality, demonizing men, you know, almost like for mocking the patriarchy. What are your thoughts about it in terms of patriarchy, feminism, all of that? You know, has it gone too far? What are your thoughts on what it says about gender, patriarchy, feminism?
Well, I feel like I liked the fact that Barbie was very ambitious, very driven, and I liked the fact that she was very much focused on her own life and she didn't seek validation from Ken, which I feel like we see a lot in films. She was very focused on her friends, very focused on her own life. In terms of patriarchy, I liked how the film reversed the idea of patriarchy, showing that kind of in the system nobody wins, because in Barbie world the Kens felt disenfranchised, the Kens felt ignored, slighted. And that's a lot of things that women face in society we have today. And I think for patriarchy, it kind of showed that Ken's world, even though men are in control, it can also create toxic masculinity because men are not allowed to show emotions. And I feel like even Ken in that situation, he had so much power, he didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So, but then it also kind of shows that kind of argument: can you really tamper with things if they're good how they are? Because while Barbie World, the end of the film was, oh, going back to Barbie, they won. But then Issa was like, well, we can't go back to it. You can have a little bit of power, but not too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah,
That's
you can have one person like.
yeah, but that's very much how it is in our society, because we're progressing, we're going into different roles, we're doing different things into different sectors, getting equal rights, some too much rights as some people may say, but we're not there yet. As I said in my article, I feel like patriarchy was kind of depicted. It was quite clever because it kind of shows that I left the film feeling like, you know what, it's true. We have kind of come far, but we're not really there yet. So I left feeling like empowered. It was great about women's empowerment, but at the same time, it's that somber message at the end, that tone of, well, we're never really gonna be the leaders of society. Things are never really gonna be equal. So really, realistically, patriarchy is patriarchy. We're not gonna escape it, but nobody wins.
Oh no, China, we're not going to escape patriarchy.
Yeah, but I had to be real about it because
Yeah, but you're so right in terms of because I was surprised that like particularly in the US where it was the view was, oh, this is demonizing men and all of that, and I just thought I certainly didn't get the message that that it was kind of saying women are great and men are bad, and that if women ruled the world, it would be perfect. It wasn't. It absolutely was not saying that. If anything, I sort of took away that there were challenges still in terms of even, with as you sort of said before, things like those modern standards of beauty and the pressures that women put on themselves almost as well, to be perfect, that was still there, that I thought was really, really interesting. So I don't think it was even a case of that they were categorically saying patriarchy is evil, feminism and a world run by women is perfect. It definitely wasn't saying that.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you had a thought about fantasy and realism. Just come on to that point.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting how the emotions of those that were playing with the dolls were actually felt by the dolls, and they can feel them in Barbie world, and how kind of Barbie, how she was getting flat feet, not things weren't going perfect. She was missing her drink, and that was reflective of the illustrations of America Ferrera's character, the mother, and how kind of that line between fantasy and realism, and how the emotions and feeling things, and how at the end when Barbie was told by Ruth to feel, and kind of how is that indicative of how women in society, how we're operating? Are we not feeling? Are we just doing? Are we just in the system of patriarchy and just not really being allowed to feel emotions? But then you could also argue that probably Ken, for instance, they couldn't feel, and how kind of living in this society, kind of how everyone can't really feel because we're so ingrained in the structure that men can't show emotions and feel rejected, but also women, they can't feel real feelings, they just have to look pretty, and kind of that thing where Margot Robbie did a good job of kind of showing how being perfect or just having things about looks and conforming to these unrealistic body standards, really feel it's more the looks, and that kind of you feel kind of dead inside. If that, I know that sounds really somber, but you just don't really feel anything. It's just about looks. But I think that just shows in society where we need to have substance. We need to have conversations.
Absolutely, no, 100%. In terms of the feeling and that thing about what makes you happy. I often talk about this actually when I go into organizations, and I talk about the pressures of certain gender stereotypes. And I feel like at the moment for women, it's like the pressure is, the hustle. I've got to be amazing. And this is things, obviously America Ferrera's character talks about this in terms of, can Barbie not just be ordinary? Like, does she have to be a scientist, a doctor? And that, I feel so often that is the pressure for women, to be amazing and to look amazing and all of that stuff. And as you say, sometimes therefore not kind of checking in with how we're feeling and our emotions and all of that as well, because we're so busy kind of just striving. So American and saying, actually, can Barbie not just be ordinary, and not
This
have
is
to
it.
achieve X, Y, and Z to be, to be somebody.
No, yeah, and it's, I think, especially with the messaging we have today of today's kind of feminism,
Yeah,
when we talk about women chasing the bag or
yeah,
you know
yeah,
being ambitious, I feel leveling up. There's a lot of pressures around that.
yeah,
Kind of maybe we could probably argue that some patriarchal standards are coming back today when we look at the messaging that we're getting from podcast culture,
yeah,
particularly in the Black community, and how there's a lot of pressure on Black women to elevate and level up. But are we able to feel, because we're still so, you know, having an emotion is basically like it's foreign to us. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
that thing of feminism has its way of elevating, and Barbie is very much empowering, but at the same time, as we're seeing, you don't really get emotions. But for Black women, that's even more. It's even
yeah.
more issue.
Yeah, it's almost like do you know what it is? It's I can't remember where I heard this recently, but there is something about um you almost wonder as women sometimes, are we chasing equality and feminism in a way that almost like we would end up literally with just a reverse of patriarchy, but
Mm,
not in a way that's healthy and positive, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like we would strive and aim for a system that's basically just reversed, where women
yeah,
aren't necessarily fulfilled, which isn't the ideal anyway, right?
yeah,
I mean, obviously, it's nice to have the choice,
yeah,
right, to be
of
able to do
course.
that, and the choice to run organisations and stuff. But are we saying that we basically just want exactly the same but reverse? And that to me is kind of almost one of the messages of the film. Is it saying that
Mm,
that's what we want? And I don't think the film is saying that. I
mm,
don't think the film is saying that would be a perfect state.
yeah, no, of course. I think it just shows that you're not going to be happy either way. You've got to probably look
Yeah,
internally, especially like when I look at Ken's kind of trajectory throughout the film. Like you have
yeah,
to look at validation from yourself
yeah,
and kind of make your own self happy and do things for you, which I
yeah,
think is another takeaway from the film. In that, even something simple as going to the gynecologist, you gotta just do
yeah.
things for you. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that I must come on to, because it would be remiss of me not to. We talked off camera about the Jordan Petersons of the world, and the Andrew Tates, whose name shall not be mentioned. But Jordan Peterson, what's really interesting, what actually reminds me in the film of the manosphere. Let's just call it
Mm,
that, the manosphere and the manosphere influencers.
mm,
When Ken takes over.
mhm,
Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. So when Ken takes over, it just reminds me of, I've seen this in the book. There's a brilliant book called Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, absolutely amazing book. But he talks about the rise of, your Andrew Tates and your Jordan Petersons and why. But one of the things he says as a bit of a theory is, Jordan Peterson and the Manosphere, their message is that their answer to it is almost a bit like when the Kens take over. It's like women need to get back in the kitchen. That's
yeah,
their answer of how to fix where we are at the moment, and how men can refine and redefine their role. Their answer is actually women need to get back in the kitchen, right? That's not going to happen. So there is something about, obviously, one of the messages that came out of the film
mm.
is men navigating that space. And I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that in terms of where you see that conversation going, and what that looks like.
I do think that conversation is a lot what we see on social media, where it's women have now got the entitlement, and I think that just kind of shows the system of patriarchy and how it's kind of it exists to fuel masculinity, misogyny, and men having power and control. And when that power, even though men perceive it as it's being revoked, just because women are getting jobs and
Yeah,
living like normal people, I think it kind of shows that entitlement. And when that kind of message is not being reinforced, that insecurity and that fragility of masculinity, and kind of how it's creating this kind of distorted world for men,
yeah,
just by women existing and actually living lives for them, getting validating themselves,
yeah,
and kind of speaking to the Andrew Tates and their kind of message. I think it just reeks of insecurity and reeks of kind of, you know, you're not getting your way, so you know, women need to minimize themselves, be quiet,
Yeah.
just for you to feel that sense
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
empowerment. So it kind of also shows the hollowness of, you know, male ego and kind of masculinity, because it's really founded on women being submissive. Well, that's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly their version is absolutely, and that's why that book of Boys and Men, which is really interesting, is almost trying to potentially redefine.
Mm,
And there's still a lot of work to do, I think, in terms of, there's been a lot of work that's been done in terms of feminism and women's studies and all of that. There's a lot of work now to be done on the men's side. And so the author, actually, Richard Reeves, who I'm a big fan of, he's actually recently set up. He's British, but he actually lives in New York, unfortunately. So he's actually recently set up the American Institute for Boys and Men,
oh
and
wow.
he's looking into all of these things, how the gender roles are being redefined and what sorts of roles should men be going into, and how do we get more men into things like early years education,
Mm,
into social services, and all of those types of things that help
yeah.
young boys to
Yeah.
see different models of masculinity.
Yeah.
Absolutely
I
fascinating.
really like that, to be fair, because I feel that's the next step. Because I feel if, you know, your identity is not founded on you being in power,
Yeah.
sometimes maybe men don't want to be in power. Sometimes men just want to be a human and just feel things, and
Yeah.
they don't want to tower over women. They don't want to, you know, do jobs or be the big boss. Sometimes they just want to be a social worker or be a teacher. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and there's something about, and as we wrap up, there is something about, and I posted as a bit of a joke, the discontinued Barbies.
Yeah.
Pregnant Barbie, whose name actually was Midge, which I didn't realize. I just thought it was Barbie, but pregnant Barbie, Sugar Daddy Ken was one of the characters, which I didn't. Apparently, so Mattel said that he had a dog, and the dog's name was Sugar. So they was trying to sort of style it out to say it wasn't really Sugar Daddy Ken. He was Sugar Daddy Ken.
God.
All of the different roles, that Barbie has played, like vast. Which to me, that is really interesting, because to me that is kind of feminism, right? That women could almost like play any role. I know there is still the achieving, all of that. In fact, actually, this is exactly what Kathy is saying. Love this conversation. Having even more reflections listening to you, the movie that keeps on giving, for sure. The point of striving for excellence, female excellence, black excellence. To me, this feels like a resulting behavior when you're part of a system that wasn't designed for you and therefore doesn't serve you. So you push to seek validation and a stake in the space.
Yeah.
What do you think needs to change for us all to just be without breaking ourselves? That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We just end up just being. Um,
Mm.
and as I was saying, there is something about, I mean, I do hope, I always hope and pray that we are moving into a space where, especially for women, that we start to be a little bit easier on ourselves, a
Mm.
bit kinder to ourselves. And,
Mhm.
as towards the end of the film, we don't have to be a scientist, the next president, whatever. We can just be. And what are your thoughts about that? What needs to change for us to just be more accepting of ourselves as we are?
I think there just needs to be less conversations about what each other's doing, like what are men doing, what are women doing. I think that it needs to come from within. I think it needs to be focused on feeling and just kind of getting that validation from yourself, because I think where, you know, a lot of this, some people may argue that this new feminism we're seeing today is birthed on still validation from men, and this kind of, you know, misogynistic Andrew Tate way of thinking is validated on the validation from women. So I
Mhm.
think maybe looking at validation from within and kind of looking at what serves you alone, and not kind of trying to look up to different, you can have your role models, but kind of your own role model probably is
Yeah,
the best way forward. And as we see, like Barbie, when she felt for the first time, or when Ken said, maybe I'm just Ken, maybe I like to surf. Like maybe I need to be someone, just be my own person. I
yeah,
think that's the next steps. And I think slowly but surely, because there's so many different role models out there, that's how we're seeing that people are breaking free. You don't have to just be, you know, one thing. Like being a woman's not a monolith. Like
yeah.
being a woman can mean so many different things, just like being a man. So I think just looking from within,
I
really.
love that. Being a woman is not a monolith. And there is something about, I was thinking as well, it's something about, like you were saying with the role models, it's what we value.
Yeah.
That what are we focusing on? What do we value? And I had a really deep conversation on Monday with somebody who actually has done a PhD in masculinity. And I was saying to him, I said, you've got to set up the British Institute for Boys and Men, right? I was trying to speak it into existence for him. But there is something about what do we value. But he has this theory, and he said there's something about, patriarchy and the system that we're currently in is bedfellows with capitalism, right? And when you put the two together and you think about it, and then you think, why is it that women are striving for the same things, the power, the handbags, all of that stuff, it does closely link actually to the values that we have seen displayed, in a quite patriarchal society. Women are kind of striving for the same things, the red bottoms, the this, that, and the other, the Cartier bracelets, all of that stuff. You know what I mean? So actually, what's the new and improved version of the Barbie that doesn't hang on to those old hangovers from the toxic patriarchal system? You know what I mean? I think that's for the next LinkedIn Live, China.
Indeed, yeah, of course.
Thoroughly enjoying this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you want to leave people with, China? What, if anybody hasn't seen it, would you recommend that they go and have a look? What do you think they can, what final words do you want to leave people with?
I think see Barbie with an open mind, and I think just kind of take away from the conversation that you can be your own role model and you can be your own Barbie, just like I said in my article when I said that you're still allowed to feel things, you're still allowed to kind of escape, you're still allowed to have that reality where it's just not about the 9 to 5 and chasing the bag. You can have your own way of imagining something different and kind of just be for yourself, really. And I think being a Barbie is not necessarily stereotypical Barbie. You can make it your own. So your own Barbie. That's what I said. Yeah.
So anybody that hasn't checked out China's LinkedIn article, please do that. It was your first LinkedIn article, right? First long form post. So please do that and check that out. One of the things I loved as well that you said is, and it's one of the moments I remember from the film, is because Barbie would walk on her tippy toes, right?
Yeah.
And once she finally went flat, and I think it wasn't until about 2015, I think, that they introduced a doll that had flat feet.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, let's and I think there is something about just embracing, ourselves, as you say, as we are, flaws, as people define it, as all, because beauty is not to do with the outer shell and the stereotypical perceptions of what beauty is. It's all sorts, right?
Yeah, just be yourself, really.
Yeah, perfect. So China, thank you so much for joining me. I've talked for ages.
I know, we went nearly to 40 minutes, but I mean, I've had a discussion, so it's been great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for writing the article. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, go with grace.
See you. Bye.